And we're back with Dumb Money, a movie about how a bunch of Redditors took on Wall Street. This doesn't feel right. That's better. So I saw this movie about a week ago, and I have to say, I really enjoyed this movie. I found it to be very entertaining. It's a very interesting movie with a couple of weird decisions. So, is it a good movie? No. And to get to why I think that way, we have to talk a little bit about what this movie is about. Dumb Money follows the real-life events of the 2021 GameStop short squeeze. This movie has been described as a David versus Goliath story. On the David side of things, you have Keith Gill along with the Reddit community. Gill was really the catalyst for this event. And on the Goliath side, you have these hedge fund firms and their managers. More specifically, Melvin Capital, Gabe Plotkin, and Ken Griffin. Now, I'm assuming that a lot of you probably already know how the short squeeze went down. But if you don't, it's pretty integral to understanding this movie. The short version goes, during COVID, GameStop, which relied a lot on in-person checkout and brick-and-mortar stores, its price went down. Its stock went way down. And these hedge fund firms, not just Melvin Capital, but others like Light Street Capital and White Square Capital, they all bet against GameStop, thinking its stock would go even lower. Now Keith Gill, who again was really the crux of this movement, he started posting on Reddit as DFV and on YouTube as Roaring Kitty, all about how he thought the stock was seriously undervalued and would bounce back. This, paired with the release of Robinhood, which basically opened up Wall Street to anyone, it all rallied the Wall Street Bets subreddit to stand with Gill. In the end, a lot of people ended up walking away with a pretty good profit, and Melvin Capital went under in 2022 as a result of the short squeeze. And that's pretty much how the story goes. Let's look at this cast for a second though. Paul Dano, Pete Davidson, Vincent D'Onofrio, Shailene Woodley, Seth Rogen, Sebastian Stan, and Nick Offerman. Absolutely stacked. Now this brings us to the first thing that I didn't like about this movie. This movie is an anthology, which is fine, but anthologies usually have a hard time making you care about all the characters, which is exactly the problem this movie suffers from. There are obviously characters you want to see, like Keith Gill and Gabe Plotkin and the people inside Melvin Capital. You care about Jenny the nurse, America Ferrera's character, but then there are other characters that just felt like a distraction, like Anthony Ramos's character and his subplot. And other characters I just actively disliked, like the two college-aged girls. I get that the anthology approach was the right approach so that you could see all these different people banding together over one common goal, but I would have liked to see more of Gil and his family and less of some of the other characters. Nevertheless, I thought the actors that got to play these characters were spot on. I mean, just look at Paul Dano. The man looks like a Redditor. But a surprisingly standout performance that I really enjoyed was Sebastian Stan as Vlad Tenev, the CEO of Robinhood. I always loved it when he was on screen, and his interactions with the other characters were very funny. Looking at this cast again, I see Pete Davidson, Seth Rogen, and Nick Offerman. And although this movie is quite funny at points, I'd honestly expect more from a movie with this many comedians in it. Now, another thing that I thought was weird about this movie. This movie is very short, about an hour and 45 minutes. Despite this, Dumb Money has a bunch of odd and unnecessary scenes. For example, there's one scene with America Ferrera's character, Jenny. We've gotten to know Jenny over the course of the movie more than any of the other average relatable characters. And in the scene, she pulls up to the gas pump and she's filling up her car. And another car pulls up to the adjacent pump, and this guy walks out, and they kind of wave at each other, and they pull down their mask, and they start talking, and they're obviously flirting. And you're like, okay, she's a single mom. Maybe they'll get together at the end of the movie. No, you never see this guy ever again. The only thing you get out of this interaction is that Jenny knows some things about car models. Then there's another scene, which is a little bit more forgivable. In the movie and in real life, Keith Yale's sister dies. And in the movie, Paul Dano and Pete Davidson, they go to the grave and they mourn. This scene would have actually been impactful if we had had an introduction to her earlier in the film. Instead, the first time we're introduced to this character is to find out that she is dead. It's scenes like these that confuse me. Your movie is so short, and yet it still feels like you're grasping for more runtime. If you can cut a scene from your movie and it still be the same movie, that scene shouldn't be in there. Next, there's one more editing decision that I thought was just wrong. The movie opens with Gabe Plotkin talking to Seth Cohen on the phone, and the scene ends with Gabe watching the GME stock price go up and up and up. And then cut to black, and then you get like 6 months earlier, and then we get introduced to Keith. Now, this isn't a new thing. Movies have done this for forever, where you open with that climactic part of the movie, and then you rewind, and they tell you how they got there. Movies like Megamind.
How did it all come to this, you ask? My end starts at the beginning. The very beginning.
But the key word being climactic. Plotkin learning about the stock price rising does not happen at the end of the movie, more like the middle or so. Why they didn't just keep that scene in the middle and cut straight to Gil, I will never understand. That was a lot about what I didn't like about this movie, but one thing I did enjoy was the sense of community it represented. That shared feeling of fighting something bigger than yourself. All these people who individually couldn't have done anything were all united on one front. It would have been very easy for the filmmaker not to focus on this part, and I honestly thought it was the best part of the movie. There's one scene at the end where Gil is giving his testimony to the U.S. House Financial Services Committee, and he goes, "I like the stock."
Guess who's back in the
And then all the other people in the anthology who are watching it go crazy because he used his catchphrase. I really enjoyed that part. Now, before we get to my final rating for the film, I wanted to talk a little bit about the book that inspired this movie. The Antisocial Network, the GameStop short squeeze and the ragtag group of amateur traders that brought Wall Street to its knees, by Ben Mesrick. I think it was later changed to a less pretentious title of Dumb Money after the movie came out. But you might know Mesrick from his other book, The Accidental Billionaires, which inspired the David Fincher film, The Social Network. He has another book out now called Breaking Twitter, Elon Musk and the Most Controversial Corporate Takeover in History. Mesrick loves his subtitles. And I wouldn't be surprised if that book also got a film adaptation. But back to The Antisocial Network. I did not like this book. Maybe it was the writing style and genre that rubbed me the wrong way, but I found it to be a waste of time. This book is labeled as nonfiction, but it is written in the literary narrative nonfiction style. If you're expecting a beat-by-beat factual account like I was, you will surely be disappointed. It works basically how a movie that is based on a true story works. The author uses fictional aspects and writing styles to round out the factual parts of the story. Then why, you might ask, do I have a problem with the book and not the movie I just watched? I have 3 reasons. Firstly, the author is given creative liberty over the material, which leaves the book with a lot of fluff. There's actually surprisingly very little information about the actual event for a 200+ page book. Secondly, this is one of the only mainstream accounts of this story, the others being Dumb Money and a miniseries Netflix released last year, which is fine in itself, but because Mesrick leaves his sources anonymous, it is impossible to tell what is real and what is exaggerated and what is completely made up. Is this what we want to be one of the only sources of information on this story in 10, 20 years? And lastly, the difference between the book and the movie is the medium. With a book, the medium allows you to be much more personal. You get to read what the characters are thinking and what they're feeling. And at this point, it feels like Mesrick might be putting thoughts in people's heads. We have no way of knowing if that's what they thought and felt, or if that's what Mesrick thought and felt. One last thought I had just now while I was filming this video. I wish either the book or the movie gave an account of what was happening inside GameStop corporate at the time, what they thought about what was going on. Maybe they couldn't get any sources, but I think it would have been a great inclusion. Now let's move on to my rating for the film. Should you see Dumb Money? Yes. I thought it was very entertaining despite its weird decisions. I thought overall it could have been a better movie, but I really liked it. I'm giving Dumb Money 3.5 stars, and I'm giving the book a very liberal 1 star. Alright, that's all I have for today. This month I should be going to see the FNAF movie, so look out for that. If you like this review, you'll enjoy my review of Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. And you can follow me on Letterboxd to read my short and witty reviews of films I watch daily. And yeah, subscribe or something so I can continue to keep paying for these videos.